Remember that time I got an idea for a build while I was recording a video? Time to talk about the build. Welcome to the Attic Dungeon. My name is Sam, and whether you want a sneaky cleric or a holy rogue, I'm here to help you with everything. So when I was doing the last bit of the cleric subclasses, I talked about the Trickery Cleric and how I thought that actually on its own the subclass wasn't that special, but it might make a fun multi-class for a rogue. Yes, I am aware that multi-classing casters in D&D 5e is usually suboptimal. There's a few who get along well, but most of them don't like it because it costs you spell progression. Do I care about that? No, today is a thematic build that wants to center around the Trickery Cleric's ability, namely the Channel Divinity Invoke Duplicity ability. The one where you can summon a clone of yourself that you can order around with your bonus action, and that will grant you advantage on your attacks, which obviously is a rogue's best friend. Rogues love nothing more than being able to summon advantage out of thin air because it enables their sneak attack. The downside would be that Invoke Duplicity requires an action. So ideally you can cast it right before combat, or if you have a friendly wizard who can cast haste on you, all the better. You can invoke Duplicity, order the thing around and stab stuff to death. You'll make it work. I also wanted to make this build because it's a cool role-playing build. Cleric Rogue screams Faceless Men from Game of Thrones to me. You know, those quite religious, culty assassins that could change their faces in whatever faces they had harvested at our creepy little home base, and that Arya Stark got access to. So this is a cool build to be a Faceless Man, or any other religiously inspired cult of assassins, or maybe just a really religious rogue, or a cleric who does some dirty work on the side. There's a lot of options here. You can play this build in two different directions. I'm only going to present one. The one that I will not be presenting is the one where you focus heavily on the cleric levels. Perfectly doable. You pick up some rogue stuff, quite probably up to level 3 where you gain your subclass, and that's it, off you go into Cleric Town. But the reason I won't be talking about that build is, even though you won't gain, or you will still gain your highest level spells of course, but you will be focused on spellcasting more than anything else. The melee powers from the rogue will be handy when you're cornered and you can't do anything else, but you always have Divine Toll, you always have Sacred Radiance as a cleric, so that situation won't really pop up. If we want to build to actually flourish and showcase the assassination side inspired by religious zealotry, I think we should focus on the rogue side. So that is what we will be doing. As per usual, my build will go all the way up to level 8, and we will, however, start by picking up the cleric levels. It's kind of up to you, but you'll see why I picked up the cleric levels. First off, of course, we need a race. Now, this one was easy. If we're playing Faceless Man, we're playing a changeling, because they have the innate ability to change their faces and the way they look whenever they please, so they make for really good rogues, to be honest. They are excellent at pretending to be someone else, infiltrating somewhere. Now, you can hear that apart from dexterity, this also is going to be a rather charismatic build, so we are going to have a high charisma for a cleric, completely dumping strength and intelligence to make that work, along with the right proficiencies and maybe some expertise if you're up for that. So we will have a changeling, Trickery Cleric / Soul Knife Rogue. That is what we're going for here. And as I said, we start out with the cleric levels. Why did I pick the cleric levels? It's very simple. It has to do with proficiencies. I cannot resist being tanky, so picking up medium armor and shields for free is good. You might be like, Sam, won't we need rogue levels or rogue proficiencies for, you know, expertise, finesse weapons? You'll be fine. Up to the point when you get a rogue 3, you can always just use a dagger. A rogue's damage doesn't come from the weapon that you're holding. It comes from the sneak attack that follows and from your ability score that buffs the attack. That's also one of the reasons we're taking the Soul Knife Rogue, by the way. So the first levels, possibly, I'm saying the first 2 levels will be Cleric, because we won't need more than 2 Cleric levels. The first level for the proficiencies, medium armor. Obviously, you take light medium armor. You're not going to grab the medium armor that gives you nice and clunky disadvantage on your stealth. That we are not going to do. You select the Domain of Trickery, and at level 2 you will gain your Channel Divinity, which is most that matters. Now, a very good case can and will be made for picking up a 3rd Cleric level whenever you please, because there's quite a few good utility spells as a Cleric that you gain from the Trickery domain and that you can pick up. And those nice utility spells can be found in the first 2 levels of your Cleric spell list, so that's pretty good. Of course, important to note here, some of those will be buffs. Nobody cares about what your wisdom is then, but some of the other spells are going to require saves from the enemies, and your wisdom will probably not be, well, it's going to start out at a 16, so you'll be safe, but you won't reach the highest tiers of wisdom, so your difficulty class will always be a bit lower when it comes to spellcasting. Now, what does 2 levels, or 3 levels rather, so 2 levels of Cleric spellcasting, 3 levels of Cleric offer us? Obviously, a nice long-range alternative with some of the cantrips. Our rogue is going to have ranged options, pretty simple to execute, but it's always nice to have other damage types than whatever your weapon is using, and to have ranged alternatives. Also, the cantrips will work on saves for clerics, whereas your attack rolls as a rogue obviously work on armor class. If you're facing a highly armored enemy, but you're suspecting that he's weak to one of the saves of your cantrips, it might be worth swapping out for a fight. Do not forget, the cantrips scale with your level, regardless of how many levels you took in the class that the cantrip belongs to. So even though you're only picking up probably 3 levels of Cleric, your cantrips will scale with you all the way when you pick up rogue levels, so they will always be ready for a scrap. And don't forget, you can pick up guidance because you're a Cleric. You can be better at anything. Swing! That's nice and handy for an assassin to just kind of be flexible on the go. If we look at the leveled spells, so to speak, Bane and Bless are always good. Subtracting D4s is never bad. Bless makes you better at hitting stuff. Bane makes enemies worse at doing stuff. And personally, I think I like, for this particular build, I like Bane more than Bless. You're debilitating your enemies rather than buffing yourself, but the certainty of Bless is good. You cast Bless and you know that it will work, and that is of course good. From your Trickery domain, you get Charm Person and Disguise Self. Now, Disguise Self is going to be useless for us because we're a Changeling, except if you need to change your clothes, of course. Changelings can change their looks, but not their clothes. You'll have a spare set, but if you want to look completely different, Disguise Self will offer you a different outfit. Don't forget that it's only illusory. If somebody touches you, they will notice something's wrong. Shield of Fate is never a bad pickup as well. You will be quite scrappy for a rogue. If you pick up the shield and a medium armor, you'll easily start out at... you'll easily have 17 armor class by level 8, because medium armor will grant you some bonuses, blah blah blah. I think even at level 1 you'll have... yeah, at level 1 you should already have 17 with a shield and a medium armor. And a high dexterity. We will have a high dexterity because it will mainly be a rogue. So 17 armor class is a nice way to start. Shield of Fating yourself makes you really scrappy in a fight, and that's fun. You'll have high armor and a high-ish dex save. It won't be proficient, but your dexterity is going to get buffed a lot, so it's going to be a very decent dex save. At level 2, you could pick up Zone of Truth. Interrogating victims or marks as a rogue or an assassin can be really valuable. There is also something to be said for silence, because, you know, if they can't hear you, you might as well be able to approach and kill them. And blindness, deafness, again for debilitating your enemies. If they're deaf and or blind, they become easy marks. So I think that's a really cool assassin's list of like handy pocket spells to have that only require 3 Cleric levels. Isn't that fun? Your Trickery Cleric grants you Pass Without Trace and Mirror Image. Now this is also pretty cool because we haven't talked about it yet, but I obviously did it in my Cleric subclass video. but the Trickery Cleric is quite good at granting stealth to the party. At level 1 you gain the ability, and it costs no resources, you can reuse it infinitely, to touch another party member, well, another creature, and give them advantage on stealth for an hour. If the hour is gone, you just touch somebody else. If you touch somebody else, obviously the buff disappears from the first person if you would do it before the hour has passed. So you can help that clunky fighter out, and then you add Pass Without Trace, which is, if I'm not mistaken, just a clean +10 on your stealth checks. Now that doesn't mean that you're invisible. If you walk in front of the guards, even with Pass Without Trace, they'll still see you, but you don't leave tracks and you gain an insane bonus to your stealth roll. So a Trickery Cleric can get a party in stealthily anywhere. Disabling this advantage on the fighter, giving everybody +10, having, because you're also a rogue, expertise on stealth, possibly, probably, will make you a stealth master. And that is something that a rogue on its own cannot do. A rogue cannot cover the party in darkness and sneak them in. So here, your Trickery, I always want to say Tempest Cleric, goddamn. Your Trickery Cleric is already quite a team player. Even with those limited spell slots that you will have throughout your career, you will always be able to get a party capable of stealthing in somewhere should they desire to do so. Then obviously, as I said, we also on our channel Divinity invoke Duplicity. You invoke a copy of yourself. If it's next to an enemy, it will grant advantage to you. Only to you, not to the rest of the party. Bits out would have been cool, but very powerful. It's channel divinity, so it resets on a short rest. If you go the cleric route and take at least six cleric levels, obviously you will get 2 uses per short rest, but hey, this is your backup plan. If you cannot get advantage in any other way, here's a copy of yourself helping you out, getting advantage as you go. But that is as far as we go with the cleric levels. 3 tops to gain access to level 2 spells, because there's some useful utility stuff in there. And the clerics offer us an easy ranged alternative. Then we swap to the rogue levels. You might want to do this, you could do this sooner, you could swap to rogue levels sooner, but it's not necessary. Also, since neither of these classes gain extra attack, you can be really flexible on how many levels you can take without losing a lot of stuff. Obviously you're losing out on capstones when you multi-class like this, but it allows you to really flavor the build right to where you want it. But now let's have a look at what those rogue levels, we'll talk about the first 5, will offer us. So you've grabbed your first 3 levels of cleric and you're on your way to becoming a religious assassin. Now what I forgot to talk about is your ability score spread here. We are absolutely dumping strength and intelligence, don't touch them. I put 16 in dexterity, 16 in wisdom to make the most of those cleric spells that we have. And 12 in charisma, because we do want some social proficiencies. You could fiddle around a bit. You could get away with a 14 in wisdom, I'm sure. DCs will be worse for the wear. And then you can up your charisma, or maybe your constitution, even your intelligence, because let's be honest, a rogue of this type is not going to be stupid. Then again, that's all in the roleplay, right? You just don't have a lot of knowledge about stuff because you were raised in a cloister full of secretive assassins and you only get the knowledge that you need to perform your missions. Is an easy explanation why you don't know a lot about the world, but that doesn't mean you're dumb. So that's your ability scores. Now those rogue levels, you get an extra skill when you pick up rogue as a subclass from the rogue list, of course, and you get proficiency with thieves tools. Now, picking up stealth is an obvious choice here if you didn't pick it up through your background, which is also quite possible, to be honest. I took Acolyte as a background, granting me 2 more skills. There I picked up Acrobatics because I have to be able to like hop around like half a ninja, don't I? You could also pick up Athletics to minimize the fact that your Athletics sucks because your strength sucks. But Acrobatics sounded more roguelike in my head. I'm sorry if I'm going all over the place today. My brain doesn't feel like being consistent and to the point. So, ability scores. First level of Rogue grants you a skill proficiency and Thieves Tools and Expertise. 2 instances of Expertise. I took the classic Stealth and Thief Tools, but don't hold back on buffing one of your social skills that you picked up. I know if I look at the Rogue, mine is proficient in all the social skills. So Deception, Persuasion, and Performance. He can do anything quite well. It's never bad to pick up one of those, and you can act as the face of the party as well if you don't have a bard, a paladin, a sorcerer, what have you, a warlock. This character can fill in that role thanks to the rogue's expertise. But I took stealth because I want to be an assassin. There we are. What else do we get? Sneak attack, of course. By the end of this build, your rogue side will be level 5, which means 3d6 bonus sneak attack on the poke that you're already doing with your weapon, which I'll get to in a moment. At level 2, we gain cunning action, which is never bad and offers a cool combination here. Since you can hide, so you can dash, disengage and hide as bonus actions with cunning action. Obviously, it's never bad to have dash on a bonus action. Don't forget that moving your illusion also requires a bonus action, but here's the cool thing where you can use your action to summon your copy and then try to hide with a bonus action on your movement, and thus the enemy might think that your copy is the real you, but it has no armor class, it has no hit points, it doesn't state that there's any way to kill it, really. So the enemy might be distracted for 1 or 2 actions, trying to cut through an illusion, gaining you some positioning advantage or just avoiding damage in general. It's a cool, like, clone combat trick to hide, and which you can only do from a combination between the Trickery Rogue, a Trickery Cleric, and the Rogue in general, really. Obviously, having dash is good, having disengage is good. You're quite scrappy, disengage might be the one you use the least. At level 3, we pick up our subclass. I already said we were going to pick up the Soul Knife, and the main reason is they have that tremendously cool ability where as you attack, you can summon a blade in your hand, a nice soul blade, and this will be your weapon, and you slash for psychic damage. If you have a free hand, which depends on you whether you're using the shield or not, you can make another one and stab twice, thus dual wielding quite efficiently as the Soul Knife Rogue. And these weapons can be thrown, giving you some short range options and long range options with your cantrip, remember. But since you summon the weapon as you attack and they disappear after the attack, your hand is always free for spell casting. That's the cool part about this specific subclass. You can walk in, slice and dice some people, then you say, oh, last one is a bit tricky. Maybe if I can make him blind, life will be more easy for everyone. And you don't have to fiddle around with item interactions. I, as a dungeon master, do kind of adhere to the 1 free item interaction per turn. We play around with it a bit, of course, but I do like the idea that this one has no issues. If your DM is really strict on item economy, on item action economy, you can just stab on the turn after without having to sheath or draw weapons, cast. You can swap the entire time, and that makes it pretty valuable, I think, already to be a soul rogue. Obviously, the soul knife can also help the party by establishing a telepathic link, vital to any good infiltration, and you can boost your own failed skills in which you are proficient and that you fail the roll. Since we have quite a few proficiencies in our list, and all of those help us at being a better assassin, it's quite cool that if we should fail one of those, we can still roll extra dice to buff it. So that's pretty cool, and that is what we get at level 3 for the Soul Knife Rogue. Our ability score increase was very straightforward. We just upped the dexterity. It's simple. You want to stab people with those soul knives, so you have to be able to hit them, and you do more damage that way. So that's all good. And level 5, of course, gives you uncanny dodge, I think it is. If you get hit, you can use your reaction to half the damage. This is good against those big spells. Your armor class will save you from a lot of hits, but if you get hit by a fireball and your mediocre dex save fails you, this is a good way to half that damage. And there you are. That is the Soul Trickster Cleric Rogue build. I call him the Stabby Cleric because that sounds like a nice medieval inn somewhere in the 1600s. How could you make this cleric better? If you twiddle around with the ability scores a bit, well, in any case, it's a good case to be made here to pick up medium armor mastery to gain that extra armor class, because you are going to be pumping up that dexterity anyway, so you might as well allow your armor class to follow as much as it can. There's also something to be said for picking up proficiency in other saving throws through the resilient feat, you could pick either Resilient Dex or Resilient Con, because your con saves are, well, they're positive, but they're not amazing if you have to keep concentration on something. So that's always a good option. Warcaster is doable, but you don't need that, because sure, that's another way to buff your concentration, but you don't need to, I can cast a spell as a reaction bit when you can already react with sneak attack and possibly get in another, well, react with by attacking and getting another sneak attack possibly, because that's how it works for rogues. Another cool thing about the soul knives is obviously that you'll always have a magic weapon. Sure, you won't have fancy +1 magic weapons, maybe your dungeon master can cobble something up for you there. There's other ways, of course, of buffing that, I suppose, but it's magic from the beginning, so there's few creatures resistant to psychic, especially at lower levels, so you will always slice through things like butter. There we are, creepy, stalky, religious assassin, delivered as promised during my previous video. That's it. Leave your comments down below, because this is something I just cooked up because I had an idea. Would you actually play this? Let me know in the comments down below, and if all goes well, I'll see you all again in 2 weeks in the Attic Dungeon.